They brought me 12 bottles for my birthday, 12, and 2 nights later my house was proof I was an alcoholic menace they needed to lock away. I smiled for the photos, lifted a glass, and let them whisper, intervention. What they did not know was that I had already started recording, and the last person who tried to rewrite my life ended up leaving the courthouse without their house. Before we dive deeper, don't forget to subscribe and drop a comment letting us know where you're tuning in from. I turned 75 on a Sunday, the kind that looks soft from the kitchen window. The garden Helen planted was still alive, obstinate little sprays of rosemary and the lemon tree bending low with fruit. She has been gone 8 years, and the house is quieter without her laugh in the hallways. The quiet would have devoured me if not for my granddaughter Lily, who drew hearts on my grocery lists and lined up her stuffed animals in my living room when she visited. A home can hold grief and still be gentle. They came at noon, my son, David, with his jaw tight, his wife, Marissa, too glossy by half, and my daughter, Tessa, who had learned to wield kindness like a receipt, proof of something she would later deduct. Lily ran to me first, bless her. The others lagged with the cake and the gifts and the smiles that did not quite reach. Surprise, Dad, Tessa said, as if the time on the invite she sent herself were not the surprise already. David set a heavy crate on the counter. From all of us, he said. 12 bottles, each ribboned and labeled. Bourbon, rye, an expensive single malt he pronounced carefully, like he learned it for this moment. Marissa kissed my cheek and arranged them like trophies. You always used to love a good drink, she said, loud enough for my neighbor, Claire, watering her azaleas beyond the open window, to hear. I used to, I replied. Now I like hot water with lemon. I lifted one bottle anyway and laughed with them. There is no point in preaching about moderation to people who have rehearsed a different scene. They took photos. I held the single malt. Tessa insisted I bring it close to my face. For the memory, she said, and angled my elbow until the label was clear. A flash, then another. Lily wanted to blow out the candles, and we did it together. We ate cake. We talked about weather and renovations and how taxes are punishment for ambition if you ask David. They left before dusk with hugs that felt like signatures. When the house was quiet again, I lined the bottles on the counter and opened my desk. I still run my life like I used to run my contracting business, papers squared, plans backed up, a mind that keeps moving even when the body aches. I set a small camera on the bookshelf facing the kitchen and charged a second one by the hallway. Lily knows them as Grandpa's owls. They blink a red light, and I tell her they keep the house safe. I also slid a tiny recorder under the fruit bowl and checked the motion alerts on the porch light. Maybe I am old. I am not foolish. That night I slept the kind of sleep that has to be coaxed. Helen's sweater still hangs on the back of the bedroom door. Sometimes I pretend she is in the next room, not gone, and the lie is kind. I woke at 3:21 to glass breaking. There is a kind of silence that rushes in after a violation. It is not empty. It is loud, the way a crowded stadium goes quiet right before the ball drops. I sat up, and for a moment, every muscle acted like I was 30 and on the job again, ready to lift and carry. Then my hip reminded me which decade it is, and I reached for my phone. I did not turn on the lamp. I listened. Whispering. A laugh that tried to be small. The soft clink of glass against tile. The scrape of a boot. I dialed 911 with the phone on mute, finger hovering over the call button. Then I did something that will make sense only if you know the promise I made at my wife's hospital bed. I waited 5 seconds. If I called too soon, they would be gone before the cruiser turned onto our street. And if I waited too long, I would be a headline and they would be sorrow. 5 seconds is a long time in the dark. I pressed call. While I whispered to the dispatcher, a shape moved past my bedroom door toward the kitchen. Then another. Then a voice I knew trying to make itself younger, careful with that. We need it to look bad, not insane. The recorder under the fruit bowl did not miss a word. I did not leave the room. If you are picturing me sneaking down the hall with a bat, you are thinking of a different man in a different story. I was a builder, not a fighter. My strength has always been in plans and angles and what happens when men lie on paper. I stayed in the corner and listened to them crash my life. By the time the cruiser pulled up, my kitchen smelled like sour mash and glass dust. The owls saw 3 figures moving across my floor, some careful, some careless, scattering bottles, stepping on shards. The dispatcher kept me talking until the officers were inside and shining flashlights at a tableau someone thought would do me in, a bottle in the sink, a bottle on the floor, a bottle propped at a jaunty angle on the counter with the cap off, as if I had passed out mid-toast and then risen to vandalize my own home. The officers were young but not naive. They separated me from the mess and did what officers do, asked questions gently, took notes, glanced at my pupils, asked if I had been drinking. I told the truth. No. If your house is a wreck and it smells like a bar, the truth needs allies. I had some. I pointed to the bookshelf. I have cameras, I said. They looked where I pointed, then flicked their gaze to each other in a quick little dance of professionalism that still lets relief through. We'll take a look, sir. By dawn my kitchen was taped off like a crime scene in a show. Claire brought a blanket and a cup of coffee that tasted like her loyalty to Helen. I sat on the porch and watched the sky brighten behind the lemon tree. The officers left with the recordings and a bag of evidence, a glove in the hydrangea bed, a thin pry bar, a half-empty bottle of rye, and, because Grace likes to make itself obvious sometimes, a smear of blood on the door trim where someone learned that old wood bites back. At 9:30, my phone rang. It was Tessa. Her tone was airy and already righteous. Dad, David just told me the police were at your house. Are you all right? We've been so worried. You have? I asked. Of course. You've been off lately. With everything. Ever since, well. We should have pushed harder for you to get help. Help with what? With your drinking, she said, and let the word hang like an accusation she could climb onto. It's not your fault. It's generational, probably. David has a colleague who specializes in these things. We're going to get you safe. Safe where? I asked, though I knew. There's a wonderful place over near Greenfield, she said and gave me the name of an assisted wellness community. Not a home. Not a facility. A community, like they were feeding me a good word on a bad plate. We can do the paperwork today. It's best to act before anything else happens. Anything like a break-in? I said. Exactly, she exhaled, relieved I was cooperating in her mind. We need to act. I hung up before I said something unkind. When a person shows you their plan, you do not argue with it. You pay attention. By noon, a social worker I had never met and a nurse with a clipboard were at my door. They were kind women. They had also been misled. Behind them, a tall man in a neat suit and a condescending tie waited by a black SUV. Marissa leaned against the passenger door, sunglasses too large for the day. David stood with his hands in his pockets like a man ready to walk to the banker with a check and get his keys. Lily was not with them. I was grateful for mercies that looked like small absences. "Mr. Hale," the social worker began, "we've had concerns reported by your family." She explained that there were allegations of alcohol abuse, unsafe behaviors, recent property damage. She had forms in her hand. "If you sign, we can expedite an assessment and placement that will ensure your safety." "May I see the allegations?" I asked. She showed me her clipboard. The letterhead at the top belonged to a doctor I had never consulted. The signature at the bottom belonged to someone named C. Lunge, licensed something. It was impressive. I smiled as a different part of my mind counted the places they had misstepped. Falsified medical statements. Unlawful attempt at emergency guardianship under the color of concern. A pattern of coercion. If you are going to throw your father away and sell his life, at least hire conspirators who can spell. "Would you mind if my attorney looks at this?" I asked, and gave them the name of the lawyer who had helped me set my estate in order after Helen died. He is the son of a mason I worked with. He likes strong coffee and hates sloppy paperwork. The social worker blinked, recalibrating. David took a step forward. "Dad, you do not need to make this difficult." I looked at him a long moment. There is a special kind of grief reserved for the moment you realize your child is speaking the language of someone you do not recognize. "I won't," I said finally, and went back inside for the folder I had labeled just in case and the card of a private investigator a friend from the old contractor days had pressed into my hand after his brother's divorce went sideways. The investigator's name is Ignacio Alvarez. He is in his 50s, patient without being slow, and has a gift for collecting the small things people do not realize they are giving away. The social worker left after I refused to sign. The nurse gave me a sad look like she had been sent to the wrong house for the right reasons. The man by the SUV took a phone call and then glared at my lemon tree like it had insulted his lineage. Marissa adjusted her glasses and pretended not to notice Claire peering through her curtains across the street like a guardian gargoyle. What happens next is not dramatic. It is the work of weeks and the steady drag of days where the phone rings too often. It is also where my patience saved me. Ignacio began with the obvious. He pulled footage from Claire's doorbell camera for the night of the break-in. He visited the corner liquor store where a woman matching Marissa's bill bought 12 bottles 3 days before the party, then returned on Tuesday to buy duplicates of 3 brands, just in case. He collected the receipt, and the owner remembered her because she insisted on paying in cash. The security camera saw her count it out from an envelope with a bank name on it. Ignacio noted the bank. He visited the hardware store where someone bought a thin pry bar and a pair of gloves 2 hours before my kitchen exploded. He pulled the security footage again, and there was David in a baseball cap and sunglasses at 10 p.m., because the sign outside promises late hours and anonymity. Ignacio is not a magician. He is a man who knows that people forget the world is recording. He found a neighbor 3 houses down whose porch camera caught a black SUV creeping by at 3 in the morning. He found a kid walking his dog at midnight who remembered a low laugh and shards of glass glittering on the curb the next day, like confetti for a weird parade. Meanwhile, David and Tessa did not wait. They petitioned the court for emergency guardianship, arguing I was a danger to myself and others and requesting the court freeze my accounts and authorize them to take possession of my home to prepare it for sale, to finance my care. They submitted affidavits swearing they had tried to intervene. They attached photos from my birthday with me holding the single malt, a bottle in my hand, the label crisp. They included pictures of my kitchen, a disaster of their own making. This is where my lawyer earned his fees. He requested a hearing and asked for a continuance and then another. He argued the matter required discovery. He submitted a response that made the judge's eyebrows rise, attaching the police report from the night of the break-in, the officer's note that I had not been intoxicated, and a preliminary statement from a forensic tech interested in the blood smear on the door trim. We were not trying to stall. We were letting them build their own gallows with affidavits they wrote while excited, and signatures they slapped down when adrenaline made their hands fast. Ignacio found the bank where Marissa kept the envelope. Subpoenas did what polite requests could not. Her account, separate from the household ones, showed a strange pattern: cash withdrawals before my birthday, cash withdrawals before the night of the break-in, a cash deposit the morning after. Ignacio calls patterns stories. He lets them tell themselves. He also found messages. David is careless on private apps when he uses Wi-Fi named Marissa Guest, and the password is the name of their cat. Ignacio recovered a log that the lawyers converted to a transcript. David to Tessa, Wednesday night. M will bring the party favors. Get to Dad's by 3 a.m. D's friend says a wellness check after a 911 call plus mess equals fast track to a hold. Tessa replied with a thumbs up and a sentence too vulgar for me to repeat here, and then a photo of my kitchen taken 3 months earlier when I replaced the cabinet hinges, captioned, "Goodbye, Old Man's Museum." I learned all this slowly. Ignacio never brought me a dramatic reveal. He set pages and thumbnails and timelines on my dining table like he was laying tile, one piece next to the other until a pattern emerged. He showed me the map of the street and little pins for every camera facing my house within 4 properties. He made lists of names and dates and purchases until even the air around the paper seemed to harden into testimony. The day before the hearing, Ignacio brought me a folder I did not expect. From the clinic, he said. He had thought to ask the doctor whose letterhead graced the social worker's clipboard whether he had written any statement about me. The doctor had not. The letter was not his. His signature had been traced. The clinic had been closed the day the letter was allegedly printed. Ignacio had the clinic's security logs, a copy of the fax records, and photos of a woman with sunglasses too large for the day slipping into the building's lobby, where she used a public copier by the directory to print a forged letter she had drafted on her phone. The building manager had been irritated for weeks about someone mucking up the copier with toner. He was eager to help. On the morning of the hearing, I wore the navy suit Helen liked. The courthouse smells the same as it did 20 years ago when I stood here with permit drawings under my arm and a pen behind my ear. On the bench outside the courtroom, my children sat together, hushed, their eyes bright with the kind of certainty that comes from telling a story to yourself in a loop. Marissa touched David's knee. The tall man with the condescending tie, their new attorney, organized his notes and looked through me like a building to be knocked down. The judge was a woman in her 60s who read everything. She read in court. She read while the lawyers stood. She read while the air conditioning rattled above our heads. When my lawyer spoke, she nodded once, then asked for the police footage. We watched my kitchen on a screen that made my lemon bowl look like a planet. We watched 3 figures move through the room like careful thieves. We watched the bottle topple, and the shadow that had to belong to David bend to pick it up and set it at an angle, staging the mess for the camera angle by the hallway owl. We watched a hand with a thin gold bracelet, the kind Tessa never takes off, reach toward the fruit bowl. We did not hear what she said then, but the recorder gave us that. He played the audio. We listened to my daughter's voice whisper, "Hurry," and my son's voice answer, "I am hurrying." Just make it look like the old fool finally exploded. The judge looked down, then back up quickly, as if steadying herself. Marissa's lawyer objected to everything. Foundation. Authentication. Relevance. The judge let him object and then overruled him as if she had done this before, which she had. When he argued that the footage could be doctored, Ignacio's affidavit about chain of custody did what math does when someone tells a lie about numbers. It held. Ignacio testified last. He does not make speeches. He made a map on a whiteboard and drew arrows from the liquor store to the hardware store to my kitchen. He placed photocopies of receipts on the ledge for the judge. He stuck photographs up with tape, each labeled with time stamped by machines bored with people's secrets. He had a quiet voice. It was the kind that makes jurors lean forward, except there was no jury. The courtroom leaned anyway. My children did not look back at me while Ignacio spoke. I did not look at them. I kept my eyes on the judge's hands, which were steady. In the end, the emergency guardianship petition did not simply fail. The judge took the rare step of referring the matter for criminal investigation, conspiracy to commit burglary, filing false statements, attempting to defraud the court. She granted a protective order. She also opened the door my lawyer had been waiting to step through, the civil suit. Do not think for a moment that any of this felt like victory. Not yet. The morning after the hearing, I made tea and looked out at the lemon tree, and my hands shook. I kept seeing my son's shadow in my kitchen doing something with his hands that reminded me of when he was 8 and tried to fix a toy and made it worse. Memory and grief are not interested in justice. They move as they like. I gave myself until noon to be broken. After that I paid bills, because even in humiliation a house needs its due. The prosecutors moved slowly. Criminal cases take air and paperwork. We stayed out of their way. On the civil side, we did not. We filed our complaint: fraud, elder financial abuse, invasion of privacy, intentional infliction of emotional distress, defamation. We named them as individuals: David, Tessa, and, because she had put herself in the middle on purpose, Marissa. We asked for compensatory damages and punitive damages and the imposition of constructive trusts over assets they had purchased with money they had siphoned from me over the past 2 years through helpful, automatic transfers and temporary loans that were never offered back. Ignacio found more. He found the way Tessa had transferred $18,700 from a joint account she set up for grocery runs into her own consulting account and then used it to put a down payment on a second car. He found the way David had sold my old fishing boat, the one I kept at his house when I could no longer launch it alone, without telling me, and pocketed the cash. He found messages where Marissa joked about liquidating sentiment, and I am ashamed to say that sentence hurt worse than the others, because it was accurate and cruel at once. In depositions, people say things they think are small. David said he had been forced to consider the long view of his inheritance, after a colleague advised him that older people rarely understand what they need. Tessa said she felt entrusted by Mom's memory with managing Dad. Marissa said she never touched a bottle that night, but a photograph placed in front of her showed the bracelet and the hand and the neck of a bourbon tilted in her grip. She flushed. She asked for water. Her attorney did not meet her eyes. Negotiations began in a whisper and ended in a sentence. Their lawyer wanted a settlement that would not be published. Mine reminded him that some sins need light. We countered with terms no sane person would accept unless the alternative was worse: the return of $186,000 taken over 2 years through household support, plus damages equal to the appraised value of my fishing boat, plus an amount for pain and humiliation that made the room go quiet. We also required the following: David would sign over his interest in an investment account he could not have funded without my money, an index fund in our joint names that he had ceased to consider mine, and Tessa would sign over her interest in a rental property I had, temporarily, deeded into her name to shield it during a frivolous contractor dispute years back. Marissa would transfer her claim to a portion of the new car. If they did not agree, we would proceed to trial with evidence that would make their social circle shudder. There was also the matter of the prosecutor, who had started to move. They agreed. I did not gloat. In the parking lot after the papers were signed, I sat in my truck and watched a sparrow land on the mower trailer I still refused to sell. I felt old and also strangely young, like the first time I bid on a job bigger than anyone thought I could handle and then did it. It was not joy. Joy is for moments with Helen on the porch, lemonade sweating in our hands. It was relief mixed with resolve. I drove home. I watered the lemon tree. A month later, we were back in court for the sentencing in the criminal case. Plea deals are ugly but efficient. They pled to lesser charges: attempted elder financial abuse, conspiracy to file false statements, trespass. The judge did not heap fury on them. That would have made them martyrs in their own minds. She gave them community service and probation and fines. She added something that made the air in the courtroom change: a restitution order mirroring the civil settlement for any part unpaid, enforced by liens already filed. She looked at me once from the bench, not kindly or pityingly, but with the sort of look you give a person when you know they have been awake in the dark, counting seconds. A year passed. I saw Lily at school concerts and in the grocery store when Marissa let her run down the aisle to hug me. David and Tessa still have faces. They also have consequences. The investment account is mine. The rental property that paid for their vacations now pays for the maintenance on my roof and scholarships at the trade school for kids who want to work with their hands. The car Marissa bought is now a practical sedan title to me. I will sell it when the market makes sense. I did not leave any of it to them. You may think that is cruel. I think of it as accurate. I updated my will again. The lemon tree went first on the list to Lily. The house, if I still own it when I die, will go to a foundation that offers temporary housing to widowed men and women who have been cornered by children with bright ideas. The rental property will remain an income stream for the scholarship fund. The investment account will do what accounts do when patience feeds them instead of greed. I will donate the car to a veterans charity as soon as the paperwork finishes circling. On the anniversary of the night my kitchen shattered, I made hot water with lemon. I sat at the table and turned the bottle of single malt my children made me pose with in my hands. Ignacio had returned it to me in a sealed bag after the court returned property. I broke the seal and set the bottle in the light. It is a beautiful thing. I will never drink it. I wrote Lily a note instead. One day, you will hear stories about me. Some will be true. Some will have been told by people who needed me to be smaller so they could explain themselves. When that happens, remember this: our family is not a ledger where numbers march and choose who matters. It is a table. Some people chose to sell the table. Some people chose to sit and pass the bread. In this house, you will always have a chair. I put the note in a folder, the same pale blue color Helen once chose for something important, and slid it into my desk. The owls blinked their red lights. The lemon tree brushed the window in a way that sounded like a sigh. They brought me 12 bottles for my birthday so they could call me a drunk and sell my life under the banner of care. They broke my house to build their case. They forgot the part of me that had always built and kept receipts. I did not clap when the judge read her order. I did not cry. I watched the light move across the kitchen and thought of Helen's laugh. I thought of Lily's crooked teeth and the way she pronounces gnocchi. I thought of the moment the man with the condescending tie realized his clients had set their own trap and pulled the rope. That memory is my toast.
Hello everyone, and thank you for watching. I truly hope you enjoyed listening to this story as much as I enjoyed creating it. If you did, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel to help support the creation of more stories like this. Have a great day or evening.